Hey everyone, and happy Monday. I hope your week is off to a good start. And I moreover hope that what I have to say today, though I'm not too optimistic on this point, but I do hope that what I have to share and say today doesn't ruin your day or your week. But I'm sure that for many, it will. And for that, I apologize in advance. But the truth will always be the truth, whether it's a hard pill to swallow or not. Secondly, I'd like to say that if some of you out there, although it might be a very small handful, if some of you like what I have to say, like what you hear, or agree at least to a small degree, I'd really appreciate any support you can offer. A thumbs up, a like, and even a share. And for those who may have a different viewpoint, I am open to constructive criticism and criticism in general. After all, we don't have to be on the same page to be civil. And if I truly believe in freedom of thought and free speech, then I myself have to be able to accept other people's opinions, even if I personally deem them wrong. And maybe, just maybe, it will give me a new outlook and something to think about. With that said, I'd like to say that I initially thought about doing this little excerpt from the bathroom because I felt that was the most appropriate place for me to present my ideas today. Why? Well, because our country and the world at large is literally and figuratively going down the toilet. And so what better place to broadcast from than the bathroom? But being a lady, or trying to be a lady, I decided against it. However, this weekend gave me time to reflect on so many different things because we tried as a family to spend more time together and do the things that normal families do, or at least did, before the world at large went completely bat crazy. One of those things was, as we always do, having family movie night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or at least Saturday and Sunday, and attending church on Sunday. And if I were Jewish, it would probably be synagogue on Saturday night. But regardless, we attended church on Sunday. And all these family functions got me thinking, no wonder our country is a royal and veritable disaster. No wonder our world is falling apart. Because even the things that reek of normalcy, that are the foundation of normalcy, are losing their foundation and are becoming, dare I say, aberrant in their own right. Movies for families are becoming harder and harder and harder to find. When I was a child, not that things were perfect. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I was a young child in the 70s. The remnants of the hippy dippy generation. But things still had an aroma of normalcy. And now there's just a stench of normalcy that has decayed. So back to my point, when I was a child, there was Wild Kingdom, sponsored by Mutual of Omaha, every Sunday night. There were Elvis Presley movies on the boob tube every Saturday afternoon into early evening. Disney shows centered around family values, not some woke ideology with vampires and Transylvanians and other odd characters that are really not for children's eyes and ears, and are just so ridiculously silly. They take silly to a whole new level. We are trying, at least in our household, to grow our child up. We're not trying to rush his childhood or force him into adolescence or adulthood, but we are trying to convey responsibility and to grow him up appropriately. And we're either relegated to shows and movies that are full of aberrancies and obscenities, or we're relegated to sheer stupidity. And the latter seems to be the better choice, at least for now, that he's only 10, soon to be 11. When I was growing up, we didn't have these worries. Typical shows included Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, Lost in Space, Wild Kingdom, The Smothers Brothers Show, Sonny and Cher, and the list goes on. Family-oriented variety shows that were entertaining and age-appropriate for the entire family. Shows with more questionable content were not available until after probably 9 and more so after 10, when most likely the children had been put to bed and were asleep. But now, with access to TikTok and YouTube and a whole host of other avenues, children as well as adults have access to everything all the time. And that also got me thinking. We can't even enjoy things as a family because it's becoming the norm to have less and less and less to enjoy. You're fearful to stay out late. Malls and concerts aren't necessarily safe. And people themselves do not want to be bothered with communion. Not religious communion, but getting together and relating to one another. Everybody is more interested in posting on social media to out-socialize one another. Even churches are no longer what they used to be. My son recently became an altar boy. Very excited. He made us all proud, but I digress. When I was a child, my cousin and all his friends who attended the same school could be counted on. Maybe not 100%, but 80 to 90% could be counted on not only showing up to Sunday service, but to participating as altar boys. And there were at least a dozen kids in Sunday school for each grade. And now the churches are virtually empty, and those who do attend are not in my age category, which is middle age, as you can tell just by looking at me, but in my mother's category and my aunt's category, grandparents and great-grandparents. There are very few families in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that are filling the pews. The churches are mostly empty and struggling. And the churches that are gaining ground, for lack of a better term, even they're suffering. But these are the churches that are telling the population that it's okay to go to Sunday service in ripped jeans, in hot pants, in pajama bottoms and slippers. The churches that are basically trying to entertain rather than inform the congregation. Now, I'm not against entertainment. The Baptist Church does a great job in musical entertainment, but some have resorted to heavy metal and hard rock virtual concerts in order to engage the congregation, who seems to have ADHD like most of our children and can't seem to sit still and focus for an entire hour or an hour and a half. And we're talking about adults here. They are allowing people to bring in coffee and tea and bagels to service, which is ironic because our family chose a movie with Kevin Costner in it this weekend, based on the true story. Phenomenal movie. I highly recommend it for normal families. And the movie was called The Hill, and it was about a little boy who was born with a for lack of a better word, deformity in his legs, that has to overcome his physical challenges in order to achieve his dream of playing baseball. But the father in the movie is a pastor, and I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but in the movie, the father is a pastor, and his congregation is in a small southern town, probably a Baptist church, and I'm not condemning Baptist churches or any other church, but in the movie, all the congregants were sitting in the pews, hardworking, blue-collar Americans, smoking cigarettes and chewing tobacco. And this was deemed acceptable because God doesn't judge. Well, no, God doesn't judge, but I don't believe he'd appreciate people attending or visiting his house once a week and putting their worst rather than their best foot forward. And yet this is how these folks are depicted in the movie. But it's not far from reality, where people are traipsing into Baptist and Pentecostal churches with coffee and tea in hand, bagels, in work clothes, making minimal, if any, effort to show respect for themselves, the pastor, and God himself. We are devolving in every aspect of our lives. And the reason we're devolving is because life, just like church, has lost its meaning. People are living vicariously through fake personas on social media in efforts to impress rather than to get together and live life. My husband had Easter, a week or two ago, and I'm Eastern Orthodox, so my Easter is coming up. But it's a vastly different world. When I grew up, there was 40 days of fasting. In fact, my grandmother on my mother's side not only did not eat meat on Fridays, she did not eat meat or fish or poultry for the entire 40 days. She also refrained from milk, since it comes from cows, cheese, since it also comes from cows, butter, and all dairy. She even refrained from oil. So it was basically matzah bread and water for 40 days. Bread and water, like a criminal. But there was meaning behind it. It was supposed to give relevance to the upcoming celebratory occasion. We didn't excuse it by saying, oh, this person is elderly and they can't do it. This person is a child and they can't do it. Of course, we made some exceptions for children and those in their advanced senior years. But overall, people adhered to not only culture, but to tradition. And not because it's a religion or a cult, but because it teaches culture, religion, and responsibility to those who participate in that philosophy. And it exposes others who are not part of that religion or that custom to that custom, and maybe teaches them something nice they may want to embrace for themselves. Women were busy on specific days designated within the holy month or the holy week doing certain tasks. Dyeing eggs, for instance, on certain days, baking certain goods, cookies, cakes, pies, whatever, on other certain days, attending service and helping out in the church on other certain days. There was uniformity, and that gave the family, as many psychologists would say today, stability. And stability is the foundation of normalcy. And because that is so sorely lacking, we have an entire society addicted to opioids, addicted to fentanyl, addicted to drinking and marijuana, and children who need external influences such as Ritalin and other drugs prescribed, simply for them being children and because they don't have a normal life or stability in the family. Forget the exponential divorce rate because adults can't get their shit together. And they are divorcing because he forgot to put his socks away, or she won't wear makeup after she gets home from work. Extemporaneous, superficial things that we would have been laughed out of our society years ago for making an issue of. But I digress. People in general, old and young, but especially the elderly and the young, need stability. And that is something we simply do not have. We've excused everything away as superfluous. Even those in the Catholic faith, I met one woman who said she was giving up bread for Lent. Other people say they're giving up watching Netflix for Lent. That is not giving something up of yourself. That is an excuse for not wanting to do the hard work. Lent, when I was in Catholic school, no, I'm not Catholic, but I did go to Catholic school. Lent meant you did not eat meat for 40 days. Yes, even in the Catholic faith. Then that translated later on, when I was in my 20s, to not eating meat on Fridays. That, in my opinion, I'm sorry, is a cop-out. You either do something right or don't do it at all. You're not fooling God. You're not fooling Jesus. You're not fooling Muhammad. You're not fooling anybody. You're not even fooling society at large. You can't hide behind your finger, people. We can see you, Carl. We can totally see you. And yet, that is what we have become and who we have become. Families use their busy lifestyle and their busy schedules, which people had throughout the ages, in fact, busier, because many of our ancestors did not have or rely upon the modern amenities we have today, which assist us in getting our work done faster. Cars to tote around town. My grandparents didn't drive. They walked everywhere. We have washing machines and dishwashers and people who mow our lawns and people who clean our homes, and the list goes on. I can remember my uncles working full 40, 50, and 60-hour work weeks, mowing the lawn, washing their cars, taking care of their duties as men, and still managing to do what they had to do to prepare for the holidays, or to take their children, or especially their sons, hunting or fishing or boating or something. The women also worked, even if it was just at home, daily making their beds, daily doing laundry and ironing it and putting it away. Many even working part-time or full-time outside the house and doing their required work on the weekends. And still, they managed to cook basically, if not entirely, from scratch during the week, or catching up on one of the weekend days and freezing it for during the week, and preparing for the holidays in the way they're meant to be prepared for. Children were present at every event, except maybe for perhaps New Year's, where the younger people were out and about and toting around town. But children were present at Christmas, at Thanksgiving, at Easter, at Mother's Day, and all the cousins got along. And all the cousins from both sides of the family were present and got to know each other and became each other's not only relatives, but best friends. And then each of them invited their friends from other backgrounds. And this was reciprocated. And so we grew up with values. Women were taught what to look for in men. A man who could not only work, but hang a picture, paint a house, not the entire house, but a room at least. And women were supposed to know how to cook and clean and iron. And none of the young generation, or very few of them, know how to do any of this. None of them have mastered any of these skills. And then we wonder why they're confused about their place in the world and what they're looking for, because we haven't done a good job in setting the example of what they should be looking for. Not only preaching it, but living it. Doing our part to set the stage for what a mom looks like, for what an aunt looks like, for what a grandmother looks like, for what a dad looks like. We have failed our kids. We have failed ourselves, but maybe we've given up hope. We don't care anymore. We've had our fun. We've lived our lives. And now we're prepared to sit back and read our books in solitude on the beach, sipping margaritas. But we owe more to society. We owe more to our children, to our grandchildren, to our nieces and nephews. At least I can look back and remember every Thanksgiving, and I know we're a long way off from Thanksgiving, but as an example, every Thanksgiving we hosted at my mom's house. My dad had passed on and my mom had not yet met my stepdad. Regardless, we hosted. There would be turkey in the oven, stuffing, a specific kind of stuffing, stuffed artichokes, stuffed mushrooms, and sweet potato casserole or souffle with marshmallows on top. Of course, pumpkin pie, cornbread, and a host of other things that were customary every Thanksgiving. And yet I speak to people my age, within 5 years, my junior, 5 or 6, 7 years, my senior, and their tradition was going out to restaurants. Going out to restaurants is wonderful, and I support the people who own them. But they should be reserved for things like birthdays, Mother's Day, Father's Day, not for holidays that are supposed to focus on the family, on religion and the value of life. And of course, some people stayed home but ordered in, and that's not acceptable either. I know so many people in my age category, and I guess the problem started there thanks to my parents' generation, though my parents were not necessarily one of them, but thanks to their generation of drug-induced paranoia from the hippy-dippy generation, many of which went on to become professors and teachers and politicians who continued to influence our children well past their prime of tuning in and dropping out or whatever it was that they were doing, and who continue to influence our kids today with their aberrant ideologies that seem to have a trickle-down effect. But regardless, I know so many people, my generation, whose parents did not have those traditions. It was a catch as catch can. Whoever could make it, made it. Whoever couldn't, didn't. And the holiday went on. Some people went to one side of the family while the other side went to someone else's family rather than alternate. People bitch and moan and complain and cry like a bunch of pansies about having to cook for more than 4 people. In fact, most people don't even cook for 4 people. Most people go to Costco and BJ's and pick up prepackaged foods that God knows how long they've been sitting there. God knows what's in them or what's preserving them. But they pick them up because it's easy and convenient, and they don't even bother to heat them in an oven. Most people heat them in a microwave. There is no nutritional value in these prepackaged, pre-made faux foods that we are consuming, which are probably killing us. And there's no cultural integrity. There's no human integrity. There's no pasta night at grandma's. There's no getting together for gyros at a Greek household or whatever your culture commands. We have forgotten how to be human. Is it any wonder that artificial intelligence is slated to take over?